Ladies and gentlemen,
so loud.
Shockingly, we're back.
Oh my God, you're so
It's
loud.
Deliverate, your Agile Product Owners podcast. I'm Cory. I'm loud. That's Kim.
You are really loud today.
I don't know why.
I don't either.
Is it because I'm excited?
You've got a lot of energy.
I do.
I don't think I've seen you with this much energy in a really long time.
That's
You're a
fine.
bit of a spaz. But it's a happy spaz. You're a happy spaz, Cory.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think.
Anytime.
I think.
That's a compliment.
So, Kim is back with us
I
since she
am.
missed last episode.
I'm so bummed that I missed the last episode.
Yeah.
For real.
Yeah.
I listened to it a couple of days ago. Bob is awesome.
Yes.
And you were such a dork. You were geeked out.
Well, I was very excited.
You were geeked out.
Yes.
Like it was almost like you were sitting with a superstar.
I was.
Bob is a superstar.
He's an author. He's a speaker. He's global. He does all the things.
Do you have a man crush on him?
No, I am very excited to talk to people who I look up to and enjoy.
You know, I'm just teasing you.
I know.
He was really good.
He really was.
I really enjoyed what he had to say. He's got a really good radio voice.
Yes. Got a very deep voice. I didn't adjust the bass on it
I'm going
at
to say
all.
it's kind of sexy, coming from a woman's point of view.
All right.
I'm just saying the voice.
Okay, sure.
It sounded nice.
All right.
I enjoyed listening to it.
I'm going to leave that there.
What I thought was interesting, because we originally were going to talk to him about product ownership 2.0.
Yeah.
And I love how he just said, yeah, there really isn't a 2.0.
Yeah.
We need to get back to basics.
Yep.
And then he was talking about coming up with a good title for his next course.
Yeah, the next course. Do you have a title?
I was thinking about this.
Okay.
I was thinking maybe it should be Scrum. Product owner is the OG. Do you know what OG is?
Yes.
You don't like it?
No.
What about bringing it back to basics?
Back to basics?
Back to basics.
That sounds...
That's what we're doing, right?
That's good.
That's
yeah.
what Bob wants to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Make sure all that stuff is nailed. Yeah. Okay. Good. Any other questions or comments from the episode or thoughts that we didn't ask?
No, you asked
Or that
a lot
I
of good
didn't ask.
questions.
Yeah.
I liked the 3 questions with your music choice.
Good. Thank you.
That was fun.
I enjoyed that immensely.
Yes, I can tell.
Again, I was all dorked up about it.
You totally were dorked up about it. But I appreciate the fact that you can see that you were dorked up.
Oh yeah, totally. Look, when I go to my conference that I go to in July in Utah, I geek out about all the people that I listen to podcasts on. I go, oh wow, I get to meet you and talk to you and hang out with you, and that's exciting and cool. And that's just cool. And I like hanging out and talking to people like that, especially about this type of stuff. So it's just cool.
Yeah, I liked what he had to say. It was interesting that he was talking about how product owners still aren't doing the things we've been preaching them to do.
Yeah.
And of course I sat there in awe and went, what do you mean? Why? Why aren't they doing these things? That's my question. Why aren't they doing them?
Well, why not?
Why? You didn't ask that question.
No, I didn't.
No, that was my question. Why?
I should have asked that.
Well, I'll ask him next time.
Okay.
Hey, Bob, why aren't
he sees a lot
doing this?
more product owners than we do.
Well, he's also going to companies that haven't really fully embraced Agile.
Right.
Right. And he's coaching them.
Right.
So he's working with people who've never done this before.
Yeah. And it's a change. I mean, it's a difficult change because it is the most important role, as most people will tell you, and I'll tell you. It's the most important role, product ownership. So.
But it kind of leads me to thinking about, as a coach, as someone who's a consultant, for example, like Bob, who comes in and he gives some classes and then he leaves. You actually need to leave somebody there with the teams to help them work. Like, it's one thing to say, this is how you do it, but it's something to sit with them and really show them and lead by example. And that's what I think a lot of companies are missing, are people to be, put in the roles of coaching on site and being there.
Yeah.
To actually show, product owners the correct way to do things.
And that's why I think he was pushing that certification piece that he was talking about in that article that he wrote. It's not just certification. It's you need the support as you go. Certification is just to let you either see what the basics are about or to go, you've done this enough now. You've got it there. So
I was 100% in agreement about the certifications.
Yeah.
Just because you're certified doesn't mean you're a good product owner.
Or Scrum Master
or anything else. You need the experience.
Yeah, you really do. And coaches help because they can help support and teach and reinforce and
it's
all
even
other kinds of
better
things.
if those coaches have been in the same kind of positions and
Right.
they know a little bit more because they've been there, right? So they've got that experience actually doing the work and not just reading from a book and preaching it.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Good.
Yeah, it was a good
I'm going
episode.
to listen to that one again. I know I'm going to.
I was kind of jealous. I was like, man, like the best episode. First of all, I'm not even there for it.
Yeah.
That was it. I wasn't even there for the best episode.
But you started a new role, so that's exciting.
I did. I was working, which is why I couldn't make the episode.
Yeah.
I have started a new role. I transitioned to a Scrum Master.
Yeah.
Speaking of which,
Right.
so maybe I'll have my own Scrum Master podcast.
There you go.
That won't happen unless you were like, oh, I'll help you.
You mean to produce it?
Yeah, you want to produce
Okay.
But I have to tell you, being a Scrum Master is as awesome as being a product owner.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's good.
Yeah, it's been great.
It's good. I found, one of the best videos on product ownership, or one of the first things I tell people about product ownership is go watch that 15-minute Heinrich video. He did a video with one of his clients, Representative Lars, and they did a presentation at a development conference called Is Safe Evil? So SAFE is a big scaling framework, scaled agile framework. And it's complicated and it's got a lot of pieces and a lot of people are starting to use that as the way to scale agile. He and Lars did a presentation about how they do that at Lego, which is one of the companies that Heinrich consults at.
Oh, that must be so much fun.
He looked like he was having fun during the presentation. I was having fun watching that presentation. And like he does, he breaks SAFE down into something that's simple and you can go, oh, I see how they're doing that, or I see what that is. And they start with the big complicated chart and then he shows how the big complicated chart is just a lot of simple little things. He makes it easy to understand. So if you're interested in SAFE, or you're interested in how to scale stuff, and that's one of the topics I'm going to talk about later in different shows, that's a good primer for understanding the basics of what SAFE is. So it's really good talk.
I want to see it.
And the answer to is SAFE evil is no.
No.
Nothing is evil. It's a tool.
Right.
So that's a great starter for anybody who wants to know more about SAFE. And I did find another article by Jean Tabaka, who's a rally coach, and she had a list of things that she's learned in 9 years of agile coaching. And I pulled out some product owner specific ones that I thought were interesting.
Okay.
There were 78 things total. So go look at the list. It's a good read.
For 9 years of agile coaching?
78.
That doesn't seem like that many.
It's very simple. So some of the ones she had for product owner, number 6, having a product owner is non-negotiable.
Agreed.
Gotta have one. Yep. And apparently, again, some people don't want to make that commitment. Number 14, ensure your sprint backlog reflects the delivery of product value.
Okay.
I like that one. Number 27, no product owner or too many product owners add up to the same agile adoption smell. No definitive decision on ranking or acceptance. So again, we got to make decisions. We got to be able to say this is more important than this. At 28, a product council is an effective way to manage stakeholders and minimize backlog churn. And that's where we talked about product owner teams and who you're working with as a product owner. Not just, a random council, but this is a good gathering of people that's working with you to build those products. 32, a product backlog is always ranked. And I definitely agree with that. That's where we go 1 through however many we've got.
Agreed.
At 43, product owners who make their decisions in a vacuum are not agile.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So when we make decisions or when we are trying to decide, we need to involve others. We need to involve teams, stakeholders, clients, technical people. All that stuff gets you're transparent basically. Yep. And that way when the decisions are made, everybody has the same information. So that's a really good one to remember as well. Number 53, agile architects and product owners work side by side to rank product backlogs. So that's where we talk about the business side and the technical side need to work together. Yep. And again, the product owner can work with them to say, should we do this first or should we do that first? Number 62, use 5 levels of planning. So this is something I definitely want to talk about sometimes, at some time. We've talked about release planning. We've talked about iteration planning and daily planning. Having that vision and having the roadmap are the other two, where you're on those 5 different levels at various times. You're always on daily. The vision, you set, pretty infrequently, but you're constantly referring to it. The roadmap you're updating every release or every couple of weeks or whatever else. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. And number 69, the biggest cost cutting lever in Agile is prioritization. Goes back to saying no, right? So we want to cut costs. We want to make sure we have a project that comes in under budget. We want to make sure that we do the right thing. The easiest way to do that, say no, focus on those things that let us be successful first.
That's good.
So I like those.
Yeah.
Those are really good. So we'll put links to those in our show notes and you can check them out.
All right.
All right. Now for today's topic. Now, before you do anything, Kim.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about a topic. Are you ready?
Okay.
A little bumper music for you. Now today's topic.
Wow.
I'm geeking out again.
You are.
Today's topic came from listener Sandra in the Netherlands. And she wanted us to talk about multiple teams, how a product owner can deal with multiple teams. So we're not going to talk about scaling per se. Scaling is another topic and another show that I want to do. But basically, if we've got one product owner and we're working with two teams, how do we do that? What are some tips? What are some tricks? What are some things we want to make sure we do and things we make sure we don't do as we're trying to balance multiple teams?
Yeah, I think that was a really good suggestion.
Yep. So the first thing that we'll say is it really depends on the maturity of the product owner. So if this product owner understands the basics and is doing them well with one team, then it's something I think that, okay, let's try and see if we could do it with two teams. If the product owner doesn't understand the basics and isn't getting, stories and making sure the team can deliver and able to do the things that we need to do, then I would say don't give them another team yet. Help them, train them, get them to the point where they can reliably do that, and then they can move on to an additional team. Also, the teams are a contributing factor to this. If the teams are mature, then the product owner doesn't need to do as much with the teams and the Scrum Masters and everything else. So if the teams are mature, I think this is easier for a product owner to handle multiple teams.
Yep.
If the teams are not mature, then you're spending a lot more time with them, discussing stories, reviewing acceptance criteria. They're doing a lot of work on continuous integration and testing. And it takes them a while to get through those things, and you have to spend a lot of time with them.
Right. So the quick answer is it really depends.
It really depends. Yeah. So, and to me, the product would make a determination as well, because if you've got a rather stable product or mature product, then you're able to do this and change directions, because that's what this is about changing kind of your focus. And if you're able to change focus because you've got a good team and a good product, then it makes you better able to flip those things.
Yes.
So that's the first bit.
So we recommend, we being, I think, industry standards, and I know you and I both agree that two teams is enough.
Yeah. I mean, most people say just, one team, one product owner. But I think if you're on the same product, if you've got two teams working on the same product, then it's easy to flip between those two.
Right. It's a little bit more difficult when you've got two teams that are not on the same project.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say do that. If you've got two different products or two different projects and you're trying to go between them,
it's tough.
Don't. Mm-hmm. It really needs to be the same product. It could be different features on that product or different areas in that product, but it has to be the same, most of the same stuff for you to do this. And
then if there are multiple teams with multiple product owners, then it's best to have that chief product owner role. Someone who is looking after all of the work and all of the teams. Yeah. And that's what you were.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you were the CPO, and then I was just the little peon, the little product owner peon.
Product owner. Yeah. And again, that's more scaling things, but when you get more than that, that's where you need an organization hierarchy for that.
Right. And even when you have multiple teams, so if you've got two teams, you still want to, still have your meetings, your daily stand-ups and your, weekly we're calling them refining sessions, by the way. Good. Weekly refining sessions and planning sessions and retrospectives. So you still want to keep those agile ceremonies within your two teams. So you don't want any of those to drop off.
Yeah. And we'll get into those things, as well. I still think that even if you're even if you have two teams, that team knows who the product owner is for their team.
Yes.
And it is one product owner. It is a single person.
So, right. So you never want two product owners for one team.
No.
Absolutely
not.
Just throw that out there.
Yeah, because that's where you get into a mom versus dad situation. And this guy, product owner A said that and product owner B said this.
But there's kind of no point in it. If your team is so big that you need two product owners, then you need to split up your team into two teams.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
So
yeah, I love telling the story that when we were working together and I was a CPO and you were a PO and the team would come ask me a question, right? You were the product owner for that team. I was not.
Yeah.
I would come grab you and we'd walk over there and we'd ask the question again.
Yeah.
And then we'd look and we'd talk and we'd say, I'd look at you and say, what do you want to do? And you'd say, well, what about this? What about this? And that's how we solve those types of questions. It was one product owner and it was you,
right.
And you answered that question.
And eventually that stopped happening. Yeah. It was just in the beginning when I came on board and they were like, oh.
Yeah. But it's important for product owners to understand that who's in charge of this, who's in charge of getting this team work, right? Who's in charge of making sure that this team knows what they need to do. That's right. And that's one person. And it's not the dev manager and the product owner.
Correct.
Yeah.
So when you do have let's just keep it with two teams because
let's keep it with two.
That's what we want to do. When you have your two teams, you mentioned we want to keep the product the same.
Right.
Right. So if it's a different product, then have a different product owner.
Right.
I mean, can you imagine
That's
having to bounce between two products and the different stories and epics and themes and try to remember what you're doing?
You're switching context and it's just too much.
It gives me
it's
a
too
headache.
much.
Yeah.
I mean, the product owner does a lot anyway, and to complicate it by adding that big of a context switch on it. Mm-mm.
The thing about having two teams is that you have to remember you're now having twice the amount of meetings.
Yep. Twice the amount of meetings.
So if you're used to having, one team and you do two refining sessions per week, now you get your two teams and now you're doing 4 refining sessions per week. So now you're doubling up on your meetings, but you definitely want to keep those meetings the same.
Yeah, you have to. You're doing the same thing. You're just doing it twice, which again is why you need mature product owners and teams.
Right. Because you do have to multitask. There's a lot. There's a lot of that going on. You also want to keep your teams co-located. You want your teams with you. Yeah.
If I'm doing 2 teams, I want them, either on either side of me, or I want to sit, close where I can see, the teams working and I can be there when they have questions.
Right. And then if you think about kind of the backlog, do you have multiple backlogs? Do you have one with different views of it? Do you tag stories differently? I personally would like to have 2 separate backlogs for my 2 teams.
And I would say have one backlog because it's one product. And then I'd have a view for each team of that backlog. So I can prioritize it as a product owner and then the teams can see what they're working on individually and they can see what the other teams are working on as well.
All right. I can buy that.
Yeah.
That's
Either
fine.
way.
Whatever.
Either way.
That's fine. Vertical stories. We still want to keep our vertical slices.
Yeah. One of the things that we talk about feature teams once or twice before, but make sure that you are creating or that you have feature teams. If you're working with multiple teams, don't have a UI team.
No.
And don't have a back-end team.
Nope.
If you have that, then you need to take some of those UI folks and put them in the back-end team and take some of those back-end teams, put them in the UI. So you need to have, both.
You need to have a fully functioning team times 2.
What the teams are, what you're giving to the teams to produce and what they're actually creating are vertical slice stories that you can release.
Right. And if you need more information on vertical slice stories, you can go back to our podcast on
That's
stories,
right.
Which was one of the first 5, right? That we did.
That's important.
Minimize those dependencies. Don't maximize your dependencies.
Minimize dependencies.
Minimize the dependencies.
Yeah. And that's mainly between teams, and stories. So if we've got a team that's working on a story, but they need something from this other team, then how can we make sure that doesn't hold them up, if they're doing it? Or how can we make sure that doesn't happen at all to even begin with, either because of they're implementing, screen A and we need to add to the screen A, or what they implemented for screen A, we need to use that technology for screen B. So you figure out a way, and really the technical people can help you with that, and the teams should be able to work through that as well to say, well, we can do it this way and not be dependent on each other.
Yeah, and that's where the communication needs to occur. And as a product owner of two teams, you should be very much aware of the dependencies between the work.
Yeah, because you've got the stories, you've laid them out. You know which teams are working on which story or which teams could work on which stories. And the teams are sitting together. They may not be working together, but they're sitting together and they can talk. They can say, oh, I'm doing this. Let's me and you get together and talk about this story.
So, right. Another thing to keep the same is the code base.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that.
I mean, it's not something, and this gets into the how, which is what as product owners we're not supposed to do. So we don't tell them, you have to develop it with this and use this technology and use this source control and everything else. But we want to make sure that they're not building two separate products. Again, they're working on the same product. That's the idea. They're releasing the stories when they're done, and that should be the same product. We're not releasing two different products. So as a product owner, all I want to make sure is that we've got one product we're going to deploy, and we've got one product the customers can use, not two separate products because this team did this one and this team did that one.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And the last thing we want to keep the same between two teams is obviously the sprint length and the release schedule. Yeah.
So again, same product. So the thing's going to go out with both teams' work, and it's going to go out on one date. Again, one product. We've got the same cadence for both teams. So whether it's a 2-week sprint or a month sprint or a daily sprint or whatever you want to do, or whether it's flow, you keep them together on the same cadence.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at it, it's almost kind of like having just one large team that you're breaking up into two, because you keep most of it the same.
Yeah. You're just working with smaller increments.
Yeah.
So similar to vertical storage, you're working with smaller teams.
Vertical teams?
That's not a good metaphor, is it?
No.
We're working with we always try to make smaller stories, right? Because we want to be able to implement something, and smaller teams are a good
way to
implement smaller
stories.
Yeah. Not too small. And Bob had a good metacast on team sizing things, and that's a good thing. And, the basics is you have 7 plus or minus 2.
Okay.
For a team. So.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. So those are things that we keep the same, right? We're doing all those things.
Yep.
Things that we're not doing the same for both teams. This is where the differences are. So story points, I say, are not the same between the two teams.
Well, they're not going to be. They're two different teams.
They're two different teams. That's exactly the reason, right? Right. Some people want to prescribe, we both have the same 3-point story and we can estimate from that. I don't like that. I understand why some people want to do that, because it's easier to say, well, this team's velocity is this and this team's velocity is this, and it's based off the same story. But as a product owner and you're working with your Scrum Master, you have to figure out how to make sense of that, right? Don't leave that burden on the teams. Don't force them into a system that they're not comfortable with.
I think that's too much of a gray area, because you're not taking into account team experience,
right,
and the individuals and what they know and what they don't know.
And because you've split it into two different areas of that product, one area may be harder than the other.
Yeah. And then you get into if you start doing that, then the people start comparing, and they're like, well, why did your one team do 56 points? The other team only did 40.
Yeah. And that's where you say, you know what? It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Don't worry about it. So story points are going to be different because the estimation is going to be different. The velocity is going to be different between the two teams.
Yeah, but you should still track your velocity for
Absolutely,
your two
for
teams.
each of those teams individually.
It's going to be different, but you still need to track it.
Right. And when you're doing the planning for those two teams, you're going to plan a different amount for Team A versus Team B.
Yep.
I should come up with better names than Team A and Team B for this. I had some good examples. I should have pulled them down. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'll do better next time.
You're forgiven.
And the hours available for each team is going to be different. Because they're just different. So don't try to force the teams into the same bucket of work, releases or release estimates or anything else.
Agreed.
Yeah. And the team issues, the team dynamic is going to be different, right? You're going to have different peoples of different skill sets. Yes, we should try to balance that out. And when you're setting up these teams with your development and QA managers and your Scrum Masters and setting the teams up, you want to have, a good amount of representative skill on each team. We want to, we don't want to put all the experienced people on one team and all the non-experienced people on another team.
We don't want to do that.
That doesn't work. But how they work through problems is going to be different. How they think about problems is going to be different, or stories, or how they like to implement stories is going to be different. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Let them do that.
And I guess that's a good point. I mean, every team is different, and you'll never have one team that's exactly like another team. They're like your children.
Right.
You love them all, but they're a little different. They have different personalities.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the way it is.
Yeah. And let them do that, because that helps them get better at delivering the product that you want them to work on.
Yep. At the end of the day, it's delivering.
Yeah. Also their focus. So one really good area is people use the Microsoft Word example. So you look at all the different features you can do in Word. Maybe you have a team that works on spell check, and maybe you have a team that works on the formatting or the margins or something like that. When you've got big products like that and you've got multiple teams, it helps to let those teams focus on a specific area. The great example that Heinrich has with his Spotify scaling thing is when you look at the Spotify app, there's a different team that's responsible for each of those sections. So the player, or the search, or the recommendation, those are different teams, but they all plug into the same product.
Yeah. And having said that, it's important to make sure you have a similar user experience. So if you've got a UX team that can work across both of your teams, that's fantastic, because then it feels like one seamless experience.
And that's why it's one product, and that's a very important thing.
Right.
And, So
but what you're talking about is feature teams.
I'm talking about feature teams. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. I agree. So that's their focus, is their feature. Mm-hmm. The retrospective results are going to be different for each team.
Of course.
And they're for that team only, unless they want to share.
I just thought of something that we didn't talk about for things to keep the same.
Okay.
Definition of done. I would say it should be kept the
I
same.
do have that on.
Do you have it, or do you have that as not the same?
I have it as could be the same.
Oh, all right. I'll wait till we get there.
Okay.
I haven't reviewed our notes, apparently.
But the retrospective results. So each team's going to do a retrospective. Each team's going to do retrospectives for themselves. It's okay to do a product retrospective, kind of like every release. You get everybody together in retrospect. But I think you still have to keep that team level retrospective for themselves. And that's private for them. You let your coach, you let your scrum masters run that, you participate. And if they want to share something, if one of the teams says, we really need to work with the other team on this, then great. Let's talk about how we can do that. But those teams' retrospectives and results are separate unless they want to share them. So keep doing that. And then the team norm. So each team's going to have what they consider to be what they want to do, how they want to operate as a team. And again, because it's a team and not two teams.
Is it the A team?
Dun, 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 dun. So yeah, definitely keep the team norms. But they're going to be a little bit different between the two teams. Again, because they're sitting together and working the same product, you'll see a lot of similarities, and that's okay, but let that happen naturally. Don't force that.
Right.
And then, so things that could be different, but don't have to be. So definition of done.
Yeah, I think it should be the same.
I think it should be mostly the same.
Why?
Because it's the focus. It's what are they working on that's different from another one. Maybe they're working on more, service level stories versus, UI level stories. Again, we're talking about feature teams, and that feature is an API, or the feature is a service, and that requires some different, doneness criteria, not for the stories, but for all stories, than the UI stories or the feature stories your other team's building.
Okay. That's fair.
Yeah. It's not going to be exactly the same, but it could be.
Okay.
Okay. So this is one we don't agree on. So the sprint start and end date.
Yeah.
You could have them the same.
Which is what you'd probably want.
Or you could have them staggered.
Which is what you don't want.
And I say that because depending on how long it takes you as a product owner to get through a planning session, you may need to do this on different days, which means your team's sprints would start on, and I'm not talking about a large difference. I'm talking about a day difference. One starts on Tuesday, the other starts on Wednesday. They're both 2 weeks and they both end after 2 weeks, but one ends on Tuesday and one ends on Wednesday.
I think that's too confusing.
Okay.
Yeah. I think if you can, just leave them all the same. Have them all start the same day. Have them end on the same day.
I prefer that.
Oh, you prefer that?
Yes. but it doesn't have to be that way.
I say it does.
Okay. So, but they should be close even if they're not. So that's my thing. And the definition of ready. So that's one of the things you put on there.
Yeah. I think the definition of ready could also be different, or it could be the same. It's kind of like the definition of done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think there's some clear lines to say, always do these, and some things to say, don't worry about these.
Right.
And then some, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay if it is, it's okay if it isn't.
Now, we kind of touched on this earlier, right? But the different ceremonies and when to have them. And as a product owner, it's kind of a pain to set up all of those ceremonies for both of your teams.
Yeah.
But it's well worth it.
And to be ready.
And to be ready for them all. That's another thing.
Yeah.
Because you finish up one refining session. Next thing you know, you're like, oh, I've got another one.
I got to turn around and do another
tomorrow.
one. But
am I ready for it?
What about my notes? What about my stories? I didn't update these stories yet.
It's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work.
Having 2 teams is a lot of work.
Yeah.
It can be done. I've done it multiple times.
I have too.
It can be done, but it's just a lot of work, and you have to be super organized.
Yes. Yes, you do. I think the organization is the key to that. Is you have to know, I need to have my stories ready by this date and to go in for this team, and I need to take, a couple hours or some time after that to update those things and make my notes and to get ready. And here's the backlogs, and I'm going to take some time. You have to plan basically a lot about how you're going to work with the teams.
And use your Scrum Masters too for help.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because that's what they're here for, to help you as well.
And one of the best tips, I think, is on the stand-ups. So when you have the 2 teams that are doing the stand-ups, it's great if you can get them to go back to back.
Yep.
So one team goes at 9:30, the other team goes at 9:45, and they're at different boards because they have different boards, but they're right beside each other. Mm-hmm. So you can be at one, then you can flip over.
You didn't add that to what should be different boards.
Oh, the boards should be different. You're absolutely right. Yeah. We're not working on the same board.
Oh, no, that would be way
stories.
Confusing.
Yeah.
2 different teams.
So make sure you have different boards, but make sure they're right next to each other.
Right. And I would suggest too, having the same columns in your boards and having that be consistent.
I like that anyway. But that's one of the things I would say. It's up to the team and how they want to do that.
I remember I worked on a team, and I think one team did Kanban and the other one did Scrum.
Mm-hmm.
So that was interesting because I had to wrap my head around 2 different processes.
Yeah.
So I would suggest, if you can, have them both doing one or the other and not, have both.
Yeah. That's weird.
Yeah.
Okay. So the stand-ups, you have to do 2 of those. The demos. So the demo.
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about that.
We should have one demo.
Yes.
Because we're doing one product. Now, each team is going to get their own time to demo their stories that they've completed. And the other one, that's where the planning is going to be different for each team. So each team is going to do their own planning session. Each team should know what the other one's working on, generally speaking. But the planning session is going to be different. But the demo is the point where those teams really come together to show what they've worked on that sprint. Because we want the customer to see this once, right? We want to see it. They get to ask questions. The other team can see what the other one's done. That's a real good touch point for those teams to keep them together. Mm-hmm. They're on the same code base. They're seeing the stories. They're seeing the boards. And at the end of the process, they see what each other has built.
When you refer to the demo, are you referring to the demo for the stakeholders? Or are you referring to the technical demo?
The demo. I don't differentiate the 2.
So I think that there should be a technical demo where
what is a technical demo?
I'll tell you.
Okay.
You just sit and wait.
You sit over there and be quiet.
So the technical demo, if you've got your 2 teams and they're both working on features, then they come together and they show off what they've done. And then they have a chance to ask technical questions.
Okay.
And then they can understand from each other why they did a certain thing or what. I don't know anything about development, but whatever.
Okay. So why wouldn't you want them to ask that question?
Because the
customers?
Because they don't care. The customers aren't going to care why a certain thing was built a certain way.
Probably not, but I'm okay with starting that conversation in that meeting going, let's talk about it later, or let's take it offline.
I don't know. Don't you think that the developers would be interested in showing off what they've done to each other?
Yeah, but that's where we move and that's where the focus of the demo is, right? The focus of the demo is not on how you did that. It's how we're solving the customer's problems.
But it's sharing that information between the teams. It's the knowledge sharing for the developers.
Well, maybe I think at one point we had, a meeting It wasn't a demo meeting. It was code reviews, and they were talking about how they were doing that. And that's where they talked about those types of technical questions and got that resolved. But it wasn't a demo.
Right. So that's what I'm thinking about. Yeah, okay. It's where they're able to show off what they've done to each other.
Yeah.
And not somebody who doesn't care about code.
Yeah. To talk about code specific stuff. That's fine. Yeah. Have a talk or coffee or meeting about that. But yeah. So yeah, the demo is where both teams kind of get together and show what they've done. One of the things I really like for the product owner to do there is to make sure that one team's stories has a complete, and we talked about this in the demo show, make sure that your demo has a good story. Yep. So the 4 or 5 stories that you're working on or whatever, make sure they flow together well, and then make sure that flows into the other team's demo well. So you can see how the two halves kind of meet, because the customer and the client really won't know you've got multiple teams working on this.
Right.
They'll just see the stories and they'll see people talking about them. And as your team talks about them, it helps to weave that into a good narrative for them to say, oh, I get it now. I understand how these pieces fit together. But they don't care that multiple teams worked on it.
Yeah. I mean, as long as they're understanding what they're getting out of it, what their business value is, then they're happy. They're like, ooh, I get this thing.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I think the planning is interesting to work with multiple teams. I did a couple times where I had 2 teams and I put them on different sides of a wall, and they went planned, and I bounced back and forth between the 2 teams. Right?
Wow, that's multitasking.
That is. And that was fun. It was difficult, but it was fun.
Yeah.
But I had to stop that eventually because I got to the point where there were so many questions that I couldn't bounce back and forth. So
why were there so many questions?
There was a lot of
ambiguity.
Yeah.
In the stories.
Not a lot, but enough. So I did one in a couple of hours, and I came back to the next one and did a couple of hours. So the stand-ups and the grooming are the 2 that I think you really have to plan around, the 2 meetings, I think, if you're dealing with multiple teams.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As a product owner, those are your 2 biggest.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then the other thing to make sure you have time for is questions. So you've got to write your stories. You've got to review the backlog. You've got to meet with clients. You've got to do some usage of the tool.
Yeah.
And you've got to have time for the team. So you've got to, if you have to block off time, then block off time. But make sure you're available for both teams, that you're not just spending a lot of time with just one team.
I find what's helpful, and this is what I do, is right now I have my 2 teams, and all my meetings go between 9 and 11 every single day, and I bounce between the 2 teams. So that frees up the afternoon for me not to have any meetings that I'm calling, at least.
That you can get some work done.
Right, so I can get some work done. So by having that block of time, I can focus on the team and those meetings, and then later on, I can focus on other things.
Right. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. So we talked about making blocking time for each team, keeping the demos together.
Yeah.
Sitting together is wonderful. Don't let them drift apart. If you have one team on one floor and another team on another floor,
put them on the same floor.
Yeah. Make it happen. We don't want to shift the teams constantly, but if one team needs a senior resource or somebody to help with some UI part, then it's okay. I mean, we can allow for that, and we should allow for that, as long as it's not constantly happening, because if it's constantly happening, then that really screws up team morale, or not team morale, but it screws up team cadence and velocities and all the other stuff that comes with that.
We haven't talked about this, but I think it would be nice to have an event with both teams together.
Oh, yeah.
You don't want to keep them separate.
Right.
You're all with each other, so you may as well go out for, I don't know, pizza and beer.
We definitely want to treat them as one organization.
Yeah. With
2 different areas of focus. But we're going to keep, we want them to talk. We want them to have fun together. We want them to
get
work
to know
on
each
the
other
same,
and
share knowledge and all that stuff.
Yep.
And then find time to talk to each one of them. So each of the teams, find time to talk to the tester on team A and find time to talk to the junior developer on team B, and, spend 5-10 minutes a week, talking about what they're working on or answering questions for them. Make that personal time for them.
Yeah. Establish those relationships. Always.
Absolutely. So we've got some good resources. Actually, there's only one resource I really found about working with multiple teams, whether it's a product owner and Scrum Master. So it's weird. There's a lot of scaling talk,
right?
But not the logistics about how to work with 2 teams if you're doing that.
So interesting. I wonder why.
I don't know.
You should write something and put out in the interwebs.
Maybe.
Yeah, you should do that.
The interwebs?
Interwebs.
Okay. So there's that. Any other thing about our topic?
Not for me.
Okay.
From you?
So if you're working with multiple teams,
Yay,
good luck. Good. Yay, you.
Yay, you.
Because you're awesome.
Yes.
Because that's hard.
It is.
And make sure that you have the support you need. If you need help, ask for it. That's one thing, let the teams help you, let your Scrum Master help you, and find ways to focus to get these things done.
And don't cut corners.
Don't
cut corners. No.
All right. Now that we talked about that, Kim.
Yeah. Whoa.
I may not do that again.
That was a little bizarre.
It's a little bumper music. I may not do that again. All right. So if you have questions or feedback or you hate our bumper music, you can let us know at DeliveritCast on Twitter and email at deliveritcast@gmail.com. We also, I mentioned it last show, but we got all of our new hosting stuff up. So we're on a new podcast hosting site and we've been resubmitted to iTunes, and Stitcher just approved us, and the new Google podcast directory just approved us. Google. So hopefully everybody's getting all the shows now and all our technical problems are solved. So with that said, share us around. If you like the podcast and you have product owner friends, tell them about it. If you want to drop us a rating on iTunes or a review, please do that. We're still accepting submissions, auditions for the co-host role. So send those in.
Please send those in, because if you don't, then Cory's just going to talk to himself the entire time.
I've got plans. I'm making plans.
It's going to be really awkward.
I'm making plans. It'll be fine. But I would like to talk to somebody, because it is better when there's a conversation and not just a monologue.
It is better when you talk to someone.
Yeah.
It's kind of like drinking. You don't want to drink alone.
Okay. What if I talk and drink at the same time?
Oh, I don't know.
All right. So we do have some questioners that I pulled. The first one, you want to read the first one?
Oh, sure. Let's see what we have here. Lynn wants to know, with product owner talking with developer team directly, what can a systems analyst contribute to an agile project? She says, as a systems analyst, I've been translating business requirements into functional specs in waterfall projects. I've just completed agile training is going to work on an agile project. So what can a systems analyst contribute to the agile project? Yeah.
So I think systems analysts can contribute in multiple ways. So we've talked about business analysts contributing and functional analysts contributing to teams to help detail out some of those things that aren't necessarily in stories, that are kind of referenced in stories. They can help detail some of those things out with the teams. They can write some of those stories for the product owner or for the teams. That's a great contribution. Mm-hmm. They can help do some of the review or some of the documentation for the teams, because the teams are going to be producing some documentation. Again, only the documentation they need to, as well as the product owners and Scrum Masters. So they can help with that type of thing as well.
They can write feature files.
Yes, for the acceptance test.
Yeah, so I think that'd be a really good thing for the analyst to do, is write the feature files and contribute to the stories as much as possible. Yeah. Yeah, I would definitely align yourself with the product owner, and the two of you can work to really flesh out the details of the story.
Yep, that's good. Okay. And the other question was from Pierre. He says, in your perspective, what is the best way to test your MVP, your minimum viable product?
Do you mean acceptance test?
No.
Test?
So you're building your product, you're building your MVP, right? So the minimum number of features that you need to be able to release this. How do you know if that's right with your customers? How do you test it?
I don't think I understand.
Test it in the market.
You test it.
You release it. I think the best way is there's a couple answers there. One, I think you get feedback early and often on kind of prototypes and designs and that type of stuff. I think you get workable or clickable prototypes. Those are really fun when you can get designers to create those.
Yeah, those are great.
And then you get feedback. Oh, yeah. What if it did this? Oh, I like that. I like that kind of movement. And then you build that, and then you give that to them, and you get them to play with it, right? You get them to use it. I think having metrics built into your product is the best way to get information to say the users are doing this, and that's either good or that's bad, and we want to know why. I think sitting with them and watching them and hearing them, how they're using your product, I think is key. I know you've done some focus session with users, and I love doing user interviews when we talk about, either what they want to do with the product or how they're doing stuff with their current product, and how that's good or bad or or what, but I think you test early with prototypes. I think you sit with them as they're using your product. And I think you have a lot of metrics. You have good metrics about how they're actually using your product to back it up.
That was a really good answer. That was much better than my answer.
No.
My answer was what? You just test it.
My answer was, what? What? I don't know.
Sorry, Pierre. I was not helpful at all.
Did he stump you?
It was so... Yes.
Yes. All right. Very good. Well,
I love questions.
I do too.
Keep sending us your questions.
Send us questions. Send us topics.
Yes.
Send us ideas. Now, we know what we're going to talk about for the next show.
We're going to talk about distributed teams.
Distributed teams. So I'm letting Kim pick the last one.
That's because I'm working with distributed teams, so I want to talk about it.
And that's a common thing. So we want to talk about it.
It's a lot more common than I thought.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm actually
You've been
kind of surprised.
spoiled.
I was so spoiled. So when I started off as a product owner and I worked under Cory, who was the chief product owner, I had this fantastic 2 teams who were pretty mature, from the Agile standpoint. We had a fantastic project. I had Cory kind of dealing with all of the roadblocks that I didn't have to deal with. And I had all my team members right there with physical boards, and I had a Scrum Master, and we had graphic designers, UX team, business analysts sending me specs. I had a functional analyst who helped me with. I was so spoiled, and I was so happy.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like heaven.
It was. It's
so perfect.
I've told everybody this, but it's the best thing that we've done. And it was the most busy I've ever been. And, we had 80 total people that were on the dev and test side, and we had 8 teams, and we were just going to town. But I've never been happier than doing that. And that was because we organized it right, because we scaled it right, because we had all the things, we were doing all the things right. And it was by the way, it was a really good product. So
yeah, it was fantastic.
It's fun. So
but it will happen again.
It will. But when you get product owners out there, when you get your organization set up, it's really fun when this works.
When it all kind of comes together,
it clicks,
and
it just humming.
Flows.
Yeah. And you still have issues. Don't get me wrong.
Oh yeah, there were issues.
But you're gonna be much better off than somebody working a project manager on a waterfall project. So
yeah,
it's much better.
So yay!
Yay! All right. Anything else?
Nothing from
before
me.
we close out this show?
Nope.
All right. So that one is the button.
There we go.
Disclaimer time. These words are our own and are not endorsed or representative of any company or organization. You can find me online at iscoreybryan on Twitter, or infrequently blogging at don'tYellAtMe.wordpress.com.
As always, I can be reached through the show, contact information.
We just delivered episode number 19.
Woohoo!
Thank you very much for joining, and we will see you next time.
See you next time.